Good morning. And yes, even where you are, actually, that's true if you're in the US. Um, some people are probably getting on in the day and or are asleep. Anyway, got your coffee handy? Cool. Maybe even some water somewhere. Movement and health. Actually, it says movement and healing because I am really, really strongly considering adding movement of some form to my program, my Raise Your Resilience trauma healing program. And yes, what does it have to do with it? Well, I think it has a lot to do with it. As we, you know, I'm a certified personal trainer through NASM. And one of the things that's becoming popular is, or trendy, or is trending, and that is the essence that doing what I'm doing right now, which is sitting in a chair, is just as bad for your health as smoking cigarettes was. Now, cigarettes killed both my parents, so I might say, I don't know about that. But in any event, they know that sitting around is not a healthy thing because it changes the physiology of what we humans evolved to have. Now, trauma does the same thing, and I've shared that here before. So let's just redo some or revisit some information here. So when we move from social engagement up into the sympathetic fight flight, which is a move of the polyvagal nervous system, what ends up happening is defaulted. We have this that happens emotionally, and I think that's a default. And you might be able to see here over on the side some of the things, the blood pressure changes, heart rate changes, all kinds of things in the body, which I have talked about here many times, change because we've moved out of equilibrium. Equally so, and I can say this from I'll call this one up here, if you don't mind being patient with me for a second here. So we're going to add this to the stage. All right, now look at this guy's face. Look, all of this stuff here, this is some of the stuff that happens physiologically when we move out of social engagement into fight flight. All right, so look at that face, which is kind of interesting. That face could be interpreted as fear and or anger, and I think both are legitimate. Now, if you remember from this image here, boom, these are the emotions. Now, physiologically, look at that guy's arms. Now, you got to ask, so what about the heart here? What does that say? And the limbic brain, once the amygdala activates the word threat, says there's a threat, all of this stuff changes, including the heart here and the lungs. And the reason for that is because your body needs blood now to either fight, hence this guy's hands, or flee. And if I could illustrate this, I'd continue this guy's legs and I'd make it a GIF and have the feet like running. So, just add a little humor to it, but partly because that's what the body does. So it has it has the default emotions, it also has default physiology. Now, one thing that I learned as a PT, so if we could just zone in on this guy, you see the tension here in the arms? Well, what that does is once that, and the head kind of tucked in like that because the shoulders come up, all right? So that creates, and if you were berated as a child, the shoulders will come up and in because this needs to be protected. The elbows come in because this needs to be protected. Now, I do know that physiologically, and if you look up the, I can't even think of the name of that drawing by, can't think of the artist either, the old guy, Da Vinci, I think. The person standing out with his legs slightly spread and his arms out like this. Well, kind of consider that basically, or you're just standing this way, which is, then they have the different lines for anterior, interior, posterior, anterior, whatever, all that kind of stuff. The center lines that divide me this way, center lines which divide me this way, all of that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, when you're just standing here in equilibrium and your muscles are relaxed, your muscle tensions, and this brings up the word tensegrity, and I should probably add another slide here. Note to self, tensegrity slide. When I am nice and relaxed, and you'll notice those pictures all have human beings that are standing because sitting was not common then. And anyway, so you're like this, you have all of this muscle tension in with the bones, because if all your muscles disappeared, you would clack into a pile of bones, and your brain and your eyes would just be rolling around the ground. If the muscles didn't have the bones, you'd have a pile of muscles on the ground. It's the tensegral relationship between the bones and the muscles and fascia and all that kind of stuff, the connective tissues, that allow us to stand the way we stand. Now, what ends up happening is, because this image here is an automatic move into a state that isn't equilibrium, we move into this muscle tensioning, this elbows coming in, the shoulders coming up, and that kind of stuff, to protect, to fight off. These are instinctive actions that are built into the body, meant to be experienced acutely. When they become chronic, then there's this, and there's the moving in of the elbows, a slight crouch perhaps to further protect the viscera. Those things are instinctive. Now, when you do that, you are using muscle tension to move the bones to protect yourself, and the pattern in which the muscles, bones, and connective tissues, if this is micro, that becomes normal, and it's not. When I was in yoga class, when I did yoga some years ago, the teacher would walk around, she'd tell us to assume pose, and we would, and I use that word very, very selectively, because I might have been the only person in the class assuming the pose, because everybody else likely had the pose, and I thought I did when I didn't. And here's why. She'd walk by without saying anything. She would simply put her finger on my shoulder and push it down, because I was like this all the time. And so, okay, we need to correct that. When the muscles and the bones go into these kinds of relationships, not only does the brain rewire, but now the connective tissues are pulling the bones in a way that isn't natural. So when you're in the grocery store, watch how people walk. You ever seen, I have one person in the store that walks pretty much like this. This is out a little bit, but this foot here is way out. And that's because the relationship of their muscles has turned that leg and the hip so far that they may not even know what's happening, but they're not taking any correction action to bring this foot back in. The straight part of the foot is the outside. So put your foot up against the baseboard, stand as normal as possible, and look at your foot. Your toes aren't pointed forward, they're pointed in, because there's that slight bump out here, right? So that is when you put your feet so that the outsides are parallel, that's what they look like. Now drop your legs underneath your, straight down off your hips and not together, and that's how we are hardwired to be standing when we're in equilibrium. Not this way. Anyway, Because of that muscular tensioning, we have this ongoing state of tension. Now, with tremoring, that begins to be changed. Great, that's cool. What I want to add to that a little bit in the program is what I'm thinking is adding some movement, some deliberate movement. We're out walking. We're doing two things. A, we're learning to walk so our feet roll because they're supposed to push off with the toes. So we're not walking whap, 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 because that means your foot's flattening on the ground instead of rolling. You ever had somebody sneak up on you just because they know how to walk? They roll that foot. When you're rolling that foot, that gait will change. Try that today when you're out walking. Try rolling that foot and pushing off, because that's the gait. You push off to bring that foot forward. She hits on the heel, and she doesn't hit like this. She hits on the heel, rolls forward. Try that a little bit and see how your body feels, because that two things I think will happen. You'll notice a posture change, and you'll notice a little bit of pain somewhere, because your body has accommodated this inappropriate stepping process. So that's just one thing, is learning how to walk. The other thing is learning how to breathe. Now, I've mentioned it here before, but James Nestor's book on breathing is excellent. Breathing is meant to be in and out through here, unless we get really invigorated. And so for me, I don't advocate real strenuous and long cardio workouts. I don't, human beings aren't meant to go that long, that fast. That's just not how we've evolved. For a minute, yeah, this guy here, what do you think he's got to do? If it's lasting more than a minute, you might want to get out of Dodge, especially if you're looking like you're gassed and the other person, animal, is not. Now, if the other person or animal is not, that's when you press in. But then it's over within 2 minutes, probably a minute and a half. That's a long time. When I did Krav Maga training, we used to have a drill where we'd be down on the ground and somebody's trying to stab you with a fake knife. And okay, if you get stabbed, oops, you got stabbed. Now, maybe it wasn't much, and you had to realize then, okay, I'm bleeding. Yeah, that changes the scenario a little bit. Everything about that changes. I mean, and the other part of it was sometimes we used a taser knife. So if you got touched, boy, you knew it. And if it was just a little, okay, well, not too bad, but boy, if they really got that blade up against you, well, Jesus, you had to do something, or you're dead. So there is this a minute and a half of how long could this feel? Like 4 months later, and it's just a minute or a minute and a half. That was cardio training. So if I do drills sometimes with my bags and things like that, I'll put on my gloves, I set my timer, and I go like crazy, hitting and kicking and doing all kinds of things just for a minute. Because that's about how long this experience was going to last. Because if you couldn't defeat that animal, you better hope you can outrun it. And if you couldn't outrun it, you better hope you can beat it. Same thing with a human. Anyway, so the whole cardio thing does not need to mean your heart likes, it's a muscle. It needs training to stay in shape. Part of what you want to be doing is just moving blood, because a lot of heart attacks are not because the arteriosclerosis here in my hand or the blockages. It's the ones on my heart, because by the time it goes through these huge arteries and then down into veins, and then the really, really small ones are on your heart. And if those clog up, there's your heart attack. So when you have a chest pain, that's why. So movement is all about getting your system to helping your system move back into equilibrium. And so dealing with this, the movement of blood and the movement of stuff in our bodies, it's also getting these muscles via tremoring and accurate body motion and movement and walking to get my body back to the place where it can be in an optimal position of health and growth, even at older age. So when I did my yoga this morning, now I've got a yoga pattern that my son made for me, a routine, and I modified it slightly because he had me going from Warrior One to the tree, they call it. And I had to modify the tree because I have an issue with my knees, which is congenital. There's nothing I can do about it. But so I go from Warrior One to the tree, then back into Warrior One, and I added to that. So I go back not to Warrior One, but I go to Warrior Two, which is a lot like Warrior One from the waist down, but then it's, the arms straight out, and you turn and you look. And just, so here I'm now moving these muscles. All right. Got lymph glands and stuff up here. Okay, cool. And then I go back into the tree, and then I go into Warrior Three. I'll talk about balance. Whoa. I think the other day was the first time I've ever been able to go from the tree to Warrior Three, including arms outstretched, which was a first, without touching anything, without having to correct or hold on, nothing like that. I've done it once on my left leg, which is a little bit more challenging to me. But in that process, I'm learning, okay, my left leg does not seem to be as connected as I would like to my balance system. So for whatever reason, that's what I deal with. Now, yoga, stretching, something in the morning, getting up, walking, all real simple things. Learning how to breathe. Now, some of the breathing exercises I teach people require using the mouth. So it's and that's for anxiety. But one of the things that was mentioned in James Nestor's book was mouth taping at night. Part of that is with people who are slightly overweight because they snore. And that helps with that. Mouth taping helps with that. It also gets, so I can now get on my spinner downstairs, which is good, steady state cardio for 20 minutes, designed to work this. It's moving stuff through my body. It's not hardcore. It's only zone 2, and I use the Tanaka formula for my heart rate, and that works. It's not real strenuous, but if you were to talk to me on the phone while I was doing it, you'd hear that I'm doing something. But primarily, I can do all 20 minutes and never breathe through my mouth. You know what else you learn through that? It starts to change your sinus system. Oh yeah, I can't tell you how important that is. So I'm thinking about it. My encouragement to you. So on my mornings, I get up. I do, on my way to the window to close the window, I swing my legs a little bit. I lift my knees a little bit because I'm going to have some stairs to contend with, and then I do around my back, the other way, on my back, just lightly, and then I start my day. Okay. Because then after the meal, I will on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do some ab stuff. So it's 20, 30, 40 of the bridges. And then I do bird dogs, they call them, sometimes called pointers. And then bicycle crunches. And then I stretch. A whole routine of that just to keep my muscles limber. And so one, which I am going back to, and that is to do your toe touches. Okay, coming from the Superman position. Now do that Superman position for a while. Just stand with your feet slightly wider than shoulder, and if you're going to set yourself up for toe touches, maybe a little wider, but not much. All right. So you're going to stand Superman, shoulders back. And I want you to notice how you feel doing that. How does your back feel? How does your pelvis area feel? Your pelvic area? How do your legs feel? but do that. Stand there just like Superman. There's a reason for that. That posture is, it can be natural or it can feel like it's fake. You want to notice the difference. So from that, then, whichever hand I'm dominant, right? So I go down and I touch, keeping my back straight and hinging at the hip. I go down and I touch my toe. Now, and I come back up to Superman. So when I'm going down with my left hand, my right hand goes up and adds a little bit of a twist. Back to Superman. Right, left. Back to Superman. And I do them fairly slow. Nothing needs to be hurried here because you don't have to do that many. The idea is just to wake the body up and move. So Monday, Wednesday, I do the abs, I do the stretching, and that's it. On occasion, if I feel like something in my body needs it, I add something else with a light kettlebell. Now, on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I do the yoga. I have a shoulder reliever, that tool. You've maybe seen the Facebook ad work. Oh, man, I tell you what, it allowed me to do not only the windmills, which are still difficult, more so on my lower back, but the iron cross. So I can pick up a kettlebell, do this, drop my arms and hold them out, lift them back up, bring them in, drop them, and then come from up into iron cross. Couldn't do that before. So I do those, and then today I'll work out. In any event, and it's common that traumatized people are not in real good shape, even though there are those who turned it into an addiction, which is just as unhealthy, because what happens when you screw yourself up? Because you're overdoing it. Yeah, that's right. You become an emotional basket case because of the trauma that's still hiding and all that kind of stuff. And then, we start taking all kinds of supplements, and part of the body isn't quite natural, isn't quite real. So if you didn't have access to those things, you'd be in a world of hurt. Anyway, all of these kinds of movements and training and stuff like that have some real benefit. But just starting with walking, which is what we had to do as human beings 150,000 years ago, there were no cars, no trains, no bikes, no scooters, no nothing. It was your feet walking, not with heels. Not with heels. Think about that. We can get into that. Just walking. I can't say they nasal breathe, but I can't say they did any mouth breathing because I don't know if we have any of that information. But I do know that this is meant for breathing. Try the difference sometimes between walking with you, and if you can't breathe with this, then you have an issue, and that probably wants more training this way. The first time my mouth taped, anxiety, because I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I'm thinking, of course I can. So I took it off, and then I just kept doing it until I can go all night now. I can get up and go about my day. I can nasal breathe while I'm doing my spinner. So it's a matter of training yourself and baby stepping and doing these light things to help the body come back to that place of optimal equilibrium, so that this does become comfortable at 2350 here. Now my keister is saying, okay, it's time to get out of the chair and start moving around. So I'll go for my morning walk. With that, I bid thee adieu. If you are healing, start moving. If you're not moving, start moving. And if you're working on trauma healing, just start taking little walks here and there. Start moving. It will improve your mood. All right? If you have questions, you know where to find me. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.